I'm going to start with Jack, and the question will be for Jimmy and Bertha after that, same question. A lot of what we think about in terms of these issues is what the risks that are out there that are possibly going to disrupt the plans and investments that you and your colleagues and the elected officials are doing. Should be a switch, Jack. You fine? There we go. So the question is, you're waking up in the middle of the night. What's that thing, that risk that you're most worried about that could impact our region and our local governments? Maybe it's an event or maybe it's a long-term stress, but what are those things that you know from your long experience we need to keep on our radar, because those are the things that could most be disruptive to our economy?
I guess from my perspective, the thing that used to bother me the most about being a public official in South Florida was hurricanes. Hurricanes come and go. We have a terrible year for a couple of years, and then we have a quiet year for 10 years, and it's the quiet years that scare the hell out of me. Because Jennifer talked about the size of the population and its growth. What that means to me is there's a whole lot of people that came here that have never been through a storm. And they think hurricanes are good reasons to have parties. For those of us that have been here for a long time, have been through Andrew, have been through the 2004 series, we know the impact. But that's not enough anymore, because as the climate has shifted a little bit, we ended up with events like Sandy. I wish Sandy had only been a hurricane. It would have been much less destructive. And then there's events that aren't hurricanes that are equally destructive. How many people watch the news about Houston in the last couple of days? It's not the last couple of days, it's still going on. So we can't count on just a hurricane. We got to deal with changing climate and changing weather conditions that are significantly changing how we're going to operate. And I got to tell you, having been through a large-scale storm and watched a government strive to provide services every day that has to happen and deal with people who lost their houses, those two ends of the criteria are scary. So that's what keeps me up, Jim.
Jimmy, you're out there on the Barrier Island, right at the cusp between the sea and the land. What about you?
Well, good morning, everyone. Like Jack, every day, certainly during hurricane season, but even now, I think part of what climate change has done is, even in the off-hurricane season times, tropical storms, major storm surges. 2 weeks ago, while a lot of people were focused on Flotopia, that the surge out there wiped out a lot of our beach in the middle part of the beach, leaving very little beach behind, for example, the Eden Rock right now. So it's the ongoing climate issues that impact a barrier island. Jack talked about the people who've moved here in the instance in Andrew or anything like that and don't know how to deal with it. We've got an entire huge tourist sector where probably every 2 years we have a huge turnover in all the hotel managers and personnel, and almost every year we're doing seminars just to educate them about what happens if one of these things come. The other thing that we deal with, and it's not climate change related, but it's a similar stress and shock. I think in a post 9/11 world, in a post Boston Marathon world, we're a place that not only has the challenges of climate, but also a little city of 91,000 full-time residents, which, depending on an event or a given weekend, could have 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 people. And our infrastructure is capacity or incapacity to deal with that, the challenges of whether it's terrorism, crime, whatever it might be. So in the middle of the night, it's the phone call from my police chief, about something going on. It's those stresses and shocks to a community. And quite frankly, climate change doesn't make it any easier, whether it's, these large events occurring in the context of high flooding on an Alton Road or an E1A, et cetera. How do we evacuate folks in a situation like that, et cetera? So it all piles together on a barrier island that has, Jennifer's so right, the incredible development. I mean, Miami Beach now has $33 billion worth of, property value, how do you protect that, and how do you make sure the infrastructure can deal with that growth? So,
Ms. Henry, you've got a lot of issues up there in a very complex county.
Yes, we do. I'll take a little bit of a different tact and just, again, remind everybody at the local government level, we're at ground zero. So when our community is impacted, we have to be on the front line. We can't wait to see what Tallahassee is going to do or what the federal government is going to do. Our residents look to us to deal with the issue right then, right now. We've all seen what the flooding scenarios have been in South Florida. They're becoming more and more intrusive into the inland. People that never experienced flooding before are now experiencing it. They don't know what it means. They don't understand it. So for me, it is, how do we keep our residents informed about what's happening when you still have a wide variety of people who have different ideas about what's going on, but at the end of the day, that's a philosophical debate that's out there. But when they are experiencing the real impacts and the effects, they want a resolution right then and right now. So for me, it's about making sure that our community is prepared to deal with the here and now and making sure that we're planning properly for the future.
Jimmy, the compact has really grown over the years and been able to focus on issues that are going to, we hope, beneficial to the member counties and cities, and especially having more and more municipalities involved. In terms of the some of these challenges that we've been talking about, what do you see in the future as kind of an area where the compact could be helpful for the cities especially?
well, Bertha's right. The rubber meets the road in the cities, but we don't necessarily have the level of resources that a Washington or Tallahassee has to tackle these. So I think the fact that the compact has come together in the areas, for example, of just the science even, what is the level of growth and whatnot. Jennifer showed a chart there of the projections of the compact. Our city commission recently adopted that now, and we're using that to model now, our stormwater program, build that into our building code, our land use code. So it's even just helping a small city that doesn't have the resource to deal with the science, the raising of awareness. If we're ultimately going to create some change in Tallahassee or further change in Washington, no one city has the resources to really advocate and create that kind of awareness. And I think also learning from one another. We're all going to try different things. Right now we're moving full force on stormwater engineering programs and whatnot, and hopefully folks can learn from our mistakes and hopefully successes. And we're hoping to learn from what some other communities are doing. So all of that means that we're not, small cities, particularly those who don't have the kind of resources even Miami Beach has. We can learn from each other and perhaps, build collective resources.
Jack, from your view, what can we do more regionally? You've got a background in that area.
Yeah, I love to look at the map of the 4 counties and realize that if you take those yellow lines away, this is one large urban area that is absolutely undivisible for one from the other. If you start down here in Miami-Dade and drive north of West Palm Beach, you're never going to get out of an urban setting. And that's an unusual place when people come down here and visit. They're always struck by the fact that they can go from the beach on Southwest 8th all the way out to the Everglades in a very short period of time. So you go from one environment to the other. That means that I think that we need help in trying, and I'm going to talk to what Bertha said and also Jimmy, we need help to keep people informed. Every day I pick up our clips or our local newspapers, and I see one more story about Miami and sea level rise. And, pretty soon it's going to get burnout time. No one's going to read that stuff. How many magazine stories can there be? How many newspaper stories can there be before you just get numbed? My concern is that we talk about 2 feet in 2060, but what about tomorrow? Well, sea level rise is going to be an issue tomorrow. And I really think that we need to start talking about how the changes in the climate are going to impact the rain that we may get tomorrow. And again, I want to, I talk about Houston because I was overwhelmed by the fact that Houston almost had no sense that that was coming. Sandy almost had no sense that that was coming. So we need help to not to say that the 2060 numbers aren't important, because like everybody else, we're already looking at our building codes and how we need to change things. But we need help to make sure that the stories that get printed are not the same story over and over and over and over again, but really talk about the full range of impacts that are going to happen and how they're going to happen tomorrow as how much they're going to happen in 2060.
Bertha?
I think the compact has been very successful in creating the dialogue. When we talk about making adaptation key front and center in our future planning, we have an example in our community whereby one of our municipalities that experienced lots of flooding decided that it wanted to upgrade its planning efforts and hired a consultant to assist them in doing so. Fortunately, when they received the product, and maybe they didn't have all the expertise to evaluate that product as maybe Broward County would, but they were smart enough and they heard the conversation, and the dialogue has been prevalent enough that they knew that maybe we should have somebody look this over to see if we're headed in the right direction. And lo and behold, the product that was given to them by an A&E firm today did not take into consideration not one element of sea level rise. It did not take into consideration any of the initiatives that we've all been talking about for the last 5-6 years. And so you say to yourself, where have they been? Where have they been? So fortunately, because of the compact and the conversations that we're all having and the drive and the push, that one municipality knew enough that they needed to have somebody take a look at that to make sure that they were going in the right direction. And fortunately, we were able to help them see and identify that no, if they took this plan and they implemented it, they would not be going in the right direction. So it's really important for us to continue to hit home how important this is, and that lesson learned for us is that we're going to have to spend a lot more time in the development community in helping them understand that they have a role in this, that they cannot wait for government to completely get its act together in terms of plans to update its codes. We're in the midst of a project we call Broward Next, where we're updating our land use plans and the like. I mean, this is something that we're all focused on, and I think that the more we push that information out there in different formats and target it to different audiences for the role that they play in helping our community become resilient, the better we all are for it.
We're here very appropriately at one of our regional universities, Florida International University, and we have other excellent research universities in the region. The folks here in the audience from the university and folks here from the business community. That's, I think, the steering committee strive to attract an agenda. So you're here at the beginning. What would you like to hear from the down the road from the university? What are the things, questions you'd like to see addressed by our universities, and are there things that you'd like to know to help you do your job this morning from the business community? Jack, does that one start out?
I think I know what Jim asked. I'll talk about the business community first and the university in a minute. But, one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that the confluence of nature and its changes and the growth of the business community don't become a problem. Obviously, it's easy to say, well, you need to be careful with the tourist community. You got to make sure that the beaches are there and that it's a beautiful day. And you're right, that's true. But I have a recurring fear that if Miami becomes less attractive to people because of the way the issues being managed in the press, that our business is going to start to calm down, slow down, maybe fall off. I was here, like most of you were here, through the last recession. And I got here after graduate school and was proud of the fact that we used to talk about Florida was the last in and first out of all recessions. We were recession-proof. We were, I looked at what was going on in the economy in South Florida generally, but in Miami specifically. And, we were close to losing it. It was dangerous. It was scary. I've never lived through anything like that here in the economy. It made the mayor and I start thinking about changing the base of the economy a little bit at a time, but broadening it out, making the economy more resilient, if you will. And so I want to make sure that everybody knows that's out there that it's a concern of ours that the economic base of South Florida become resilient, become strong, become not recession-proof, but recession-responsive, and that we go forward looking at how the economy can broaden and change. The university's role is what the university's role is always, and they play such an important part in the community. We need their thought. We need their research. I get up in the morning and I got issues from what happened in the streets the night before to whether we're going to have a labor strike on the garbage side to what it takes, as Bertha says, to make the place run. So I need somebody who can look long-term, look big thought, and provide us with that, which is such an important part of what we do. And the university's where I'm going to look for that.
Yeah, look, we're sort of writing the playbook right now. I mean, there's different models of it. There's the Netherlands example, but there are different geology and whatnot. But we're writing a playbook here, and there's nobody we can hire consultants. We've hired a big international consultant, but to some degree, they're just figuring it out like us as we're writing the playbook. So I think there's a tremendous role for universities in taking a look at not just the engineering side of it, the land use side of it, the design and architecture side of it. We're a little microcosm. How does climate change impact historic properties that are built at grade, and how do we address that issue? As we raise our infrastructure and we raise roads and sidewalks, well, what do adjacent business properties have to do? What's the transition period? Because no one has all the money to do it overnight. So how do we transition? And I think so many different departments at universities can take pieces of this and help us put together a blueprint as we move forward to it. And universities obviously also do a tremendous job in terms of educating. I mean, the reality is, we talk about 2060, 2080. Well, probably not too many of us in this room will see 2060, but they're educating the generations that really this will be their reality. And so to make them aware and conscious about this as they enter the workforce, as they become the business leaders and political leaders, so that we're not having discussions like we are today about whether it's really happening or not, or whether we can use the words. That's probably in many respects the most they are creating the new generation of Americans that are going to have to solve this problem long term, and I think that's a role they have to continue to play.
I think that having a collaborative between practitioners and academia is really important. As you all know, when we are day in and day out, we are the rubber hit the road. Jack's right. We've got to deal with the here and now, and it's difficult at times when you're having conversations with people who are very thoughtful, and they're really working through these issues in a way that sometimes you want to move now, but they require long-term thought. And so the universities are creating this new generation of people who are sensitive, you're right, Jimmy, that they understand the issue, that they are working with the people who are delivering the services every day to come up with practical ways to translate what we should be doing. And so when we work together, we just have a much better outcome, because the practical, when it marries up with the theoretical, you'll be surprised what you can come up with. So I think the universities have a role in making sure that they continue to do the research, do the science, have the people that are practicing dealing with the issues test some of the theories that they're working with, so that we get better. We can only get better when we work together. Okay.
Thank you, panel. We have a couple minutes for questions. I do want to acknowledge that from Monroe County, we have Commissioner Carruthers here from elected official. I'm not sure if Mayor Stoddard's here from South Miami, but I know Commissioners Carruthers. Commissioner, is there any question you might have for these folks?
That's what the business sector is all about.
Oh,
Commissioner, can a mic get to the commissioner so we can record and archive this? I can also repeat your question, but I know that was my instructions, was to get this recorded. Thank you so much. Up from the Florida Keys.
Thank you very much. And I know our administrator would be here today, but he's got kids, so and it's the end of the school year for them. So, I jokingly said, "Where's the money?" Because I think that's all of our issues is how are we going to fund this? Because I don't think we have any idea what the scope of it is. And if you saw that first slide and looking at the property values, certainly in Monroe County, it's a tremendous issue going to be for us, as it is for all of us. But I also want to say that I've already sent some emails asking questions based on this conversation to our staff that have been very, very, very helpful. I think one of the issues is, how do we really understand how each of our communities relates to each other? Because, Monroe County seems like a thing unto itself, but I could tell you that probably half of the property owners, certainly of second homes, live in your areas. So it's, I know you do. So I think we need to really take a look at how we all live together, but how our topography is different and how our densities are different, and how one of our technologies that work in the beach are not going to work in Big Pine Key. And likewise, there may be areas of Miami-Dade County where some of the work we're doing is applicable. So I think we need to start to get a little more granular in what we look at, and continue obviously to share technologies. But I think, Ms. Henry, you sort of touched on it when you were talking about philosophy. I think that that's a big issue. We need to completely change the philosophical understanding of what we're talking about on a statewide and a national level, and really understand that we have to make these investments, because I don't ever see a future where people are not going to want to live on the water. It's in our nature. And so we need to be able to be resilient and work towards ensuring that we can maintain our quality of life. So the more education we have and the more we get this out, maybe we can start to change some minds in Tallahassee and in DC as well. But I guess that my first question is, where's the money come from, and how do we get more granular in sharing our technologies?
Jimmy, you want to start? You've got a history down there in Marathon.
Yeah, I do. On the money issue, look, obviously, when people acknowledge there's a problem, and it's a significant problem, Miami Beach, we had no choice. People suddenly saw neighborhoods like Sunset Harbor, one of the hottest neighborhoods in Miami Beach and probably Dade County. You couldn't open the doors of restaurants during high tides. West Avenue, a very hot residential area. When A1A was overly flooded and we had to close it. So fortunately, in our community, both businesses and residents have expressed a willingness to, thus far, pay the price, have taxes, have increases in our stormwater fees to do all this work. How long that will last and how far we can go. So the more people understand that this is not just a Miami Beach problem or a Key West problem, to educate folks on the fact that, look, the Everglades are one of the most at-risk assets, that everyone takes for granted. Well, it's West Dade or West Broward. Those are some of the most vulnerable areas. So it's really educating folks that this is a very serious problem. The other thing is, and this is where the business community helps, we talk about, because people can look and say 2060, my God, or 2080. But, people make investments on shorter time frames. In the next 10 to 15 years, people begin to make the investments, time frames are 30, 40 years out. Now, when you're in 2020 and you're saying, well, I'm going to build this building, but in 2060, there could be 3 feet, maybe they don't make that investment. So I think that also working with business, insurance companies, and banks to understand that we really have a shorter term when we think about our investment strategy, and we've got to start, therefore, dealing with infrastructure issues now so that when people are looking to buy, invest, build, whatever, in 10, 15 years, that horizon is not a 2060 horizon, but a 2090 horizon or a 2100 horizon. So they keep making the investments that pay the taxes that we can then do the work with. So,
Bertha, Jack, we've got a couple seconds or minutes, but do you want to make any closing comments or respond?
The only thing that I would say is that every little step helps us. So when we start to talk about, and we've been working on green initiatives for, it seems like forever, right, Jennifer? But they're starting to make a difference. And when I look at my organization, my team, they ask the question, okay, how can I make this green now? How can I move away from gas to propane? How can I, what kinds of moves can I make in order to make sure that my operating expenses are smaller in the long run than they are today with the things that we've done in the past. So I think small steps, large steps are definitely needed. The business community, I think they're finally listening. They pick up the paper, they read Fitch, they read Moody's and S&P, so they know that the world's watching and they want to know what are we doing about it, and they want to make sure that we're doing something, that we're not just sitting around waiting for it to happen. So little steps generate big steps, and so I just think we keep the pressure on.
I want to thank everybody for being here. It's an early morning. This is a full house, and that really means a lot. And it means that you'll talk to your friends who talk to your friends, and maybe we'll start to realize that today is the day. It's not 10 years from now. It's today. Today you start doing it, and that's just what Bertha said, just what Jimmy said. Every day we have to do stuff. We have to start looking at the resiliency. Resiliency in Miami-Dade County, from my perspective, is a human services issue. Come to Overtown, see the problem we've got there. Look what happens there every night when my phone rings. And then you want to figure out how to make something resilient? Come talk to us about that. So we need to deal with all of this. And all of you that are here today, think about resiliency as more than just climate change and sea level rise. Think of resiliency as how do we make our communities more acceptable to rapid change, whether it's climatological or social or architectural or whatever. So that's all for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking this great panel.